Hello and welcome to today's episode of Trending. I'm still here despite yesterday saying I was going to be in Mexico. I don't even know where I am these days. Today's show is brought to you by the brand new range of Ickonic coffee. Head over to shop.ickonic.com and use the code Trending. You get 10% off. All the proceeds go towards what we're trying to do here. How are you, Rich? I wasn't expecting to see you, mate, but here we are.
I just find it funny. Yesterday, I thought you might get trafficked off to Mexico, and it turns out you weren't going anywhere near Mexico at all. In fact, you weren't even going out the county. So it's great, isn't it?
Mate, honestly, it's parenthood. If you're a parent of young kids, you realise that one day becomes the next. You don't even know where you are. I'm going to Mexico tomorrow, Rich. That bit's true. Right, talking of Mexico, if I was a Mexican, I might have the name Luna. That's a Mexican name, I'm told.
It's also another name for the moon, isn't it? So you've got this Shekinah connection who represents the moon and this Kabbalistic cult that's running around ruining everybody's lives. So to change your name, and I didn't know this till you just told me, Gaz, but she changed her name to Luna, this lady.
Yeah, she being Ana Paulina Luna, who is in charge, we're told, of this, big, huge declassification of the Epstein client list, the JFK killing, and various other things, killing of Martin Luther King. And lots of other things that, the people who were accused of it clearly didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, very odd one. And then you look into her background. I mean, I didn't know she changed her name to Luna. So that, again, is for me, a red flag. But Republican congresswoman who said she was Jewish had a Nazi grandfather. Now, you can't really help what your grandfather was.
No.
But you can help that you're lying about it and changing your name to Luna to hide it. So straight off the bat, she's not someone to be trusted, especially with this stuff. Now, she is a Messianic Christian, but she's actually a Messianic Jew. But really, when it comes to this level, when you've got these Christian Zionists, it really makes no difference. They kind of bleed into each other. So Florida Republican Ana Pauline Luna claimed that she had been raised as a Messianic Jew, but her grandfather actually allegedly fought with the Nazis. Now, we see a lot of this crossing over. Some of the British royals were in there with the Nazis. It's not a big surprise. A Floridan Republican was elected in November, so this is an old article, claimed to have Jewish ancestry, but an investigation by the Washington Post appears to show that her claim was false. So she's already lying off the bat. Said she was brought up as an Ashkenazi Messianic Jew. So that will also go into this Messianic cult that we've been looking into, these Chabad guys for a long time that are around Trump, Putin, everyone else, Zelensky involved, RFK Jr. They have this whole plan for the Middle East, the Greater Israel Project, Solomon's Temple. She's very much in bed with them. So she's not going to be the person to expose Israel's part, or any of them, the Vatican's part in what happened to any of these guys. And obviously people like Mandelson, as we'll discuss soon, who was very close to Jeffrey Epstein, buying belts with him on St. Bart's Island, the same island that P. Diddy was trafficking young people, by the looks of it, allegedly, across. And that island is very, very close to Epstein Island. So the likelihood of her looking into these things legitimately is very, very low. And then she has the Messianic connection there as well, pushing for this third temple nonsense, which is dragging the Christians in to be used as a scapegoat for this Messianic cult. They believe that they're waiting for Jesus to come back, but really they're waiting for the Antichrist and all of this stuff. And it gets very complex and weird. But have a look into these bad guys. But she's a Messianic occultist by the looks of it, which is lovely to find out. But yeah, hopefully some of the alternative media elsewhere will start reporting on this factually, because she's not one to be trusted.
It's one of those things, Rich, like you talk about this whole messianic agenda, the third temple, and I can see people at home kind of going, oh, mate, what is... But the point is, it's not that we believe in this.
No.
It's that they believe in this, and the people surrounding Trump massively, surrounding RFK Jr., and even actually surrounding Putin and Zelensky. So it just goes to show that these people are linked in with all the same people that believe this stuff, the battle of Gog and Magog, and the fact that you've got this, three battles, First World, Second World War, now the Third World War feels ever closer. People, would like to say that it's prophecy, but I don't think it's a prophecy if you make it happen. So I looked into her, Rich, because for me, it wouldn't have mattered who it was. As soon as I'm told that someone's going to head up the task force to go through all the documentation and then declassify it, I go, right, okay, well, who's that person then? Because I don't know about you, Rich, I don't see why we need a middleman or a middlewoman. Just declassify the files. Just put the files out there and let people independently investigate them and see what they say. By going through a task force, what that is just basically, it's a little funnel for redactions. That's all it's going to be.
It's a filtering process, Gaz. Exactly what you're saying.
Process. And so when I looked at the list of things, it's like, okay, JFK. Well, people, would talk about, Lee Harvey Oswald, the Cubans. They would, talk about various different fractions within the mafia and the mob and who was behind it. There's lots of theories around JFK, obviously. But there's a huge theory which involves Israel. And it involves the fact that JFK was trying to prevent Israel from having a nuclear weapon, the nuclear weapons that they have now, but pretend they don't. He was also trying to have AIPAC classified as a foreign lobby group, which is, of course, what they are. And if they were registered as a foreign lobby group, they would go through different protocols that they don't have to now. Now, as soon as JFK died, the first thing that Lyndon B. Johnson did when he came into power was actually just throw that off the table. Don't worry about it. AIPAC is fine. And so I looked at her and I thought, okay, I saw all the stuff about her, originally being Mayor Hoffa, and her father being raising her in the Messianic faith, whether it's the Messianic Judaism or Messianic Christianity, doesn't really make any difference. I saw the fact that she'd actually claimed in 2020 that her uncle was stalking her and had actually, filed against her uncle. When it turns out what he said, his name's Edward Mayer Hoffa, he said that all he was doing was basically questioning her biography on social media. So he's a family member who's saying she's lying about who she is and what have you. So I looked at her and I thought, oh, hang on a minute. She's been given money by AIPAC, right? Okay, well, there's a conflict of interest then, because if it comes out that Israel and this lobby group was in any way involved in the killing of JFK, is that going to make it through the redaction filter? And then you look at Epstein, who for anyone with eyes to see is well aware was a Mossad agent, along with Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father was a Mossad agent, Robert Maxwell, who was actually murdered by the Mossad, right? So she's coming from this messianic stuff. She's funded by AIPAC. She's very close to Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, there's a tweet there, which I can show you now on the screen, where she's saying, like, Bibi in the house, with a photo of her, obviously when Bibi's going to Congress to go and, tell everyone in America what to do. And then I found this as well, Rich, which you might find interesting. This is in 2023. She tried to pass an act called the Stand With Israel Act.
No way.
I mean, so you've got someone who is obviously, close to Israel, supportive of Israel, raised in a way, whether Jewish or Christian, to basically follow the rule of Israel, the truth of Israel, of this third temple and all that stuff that these messianic people follow. And she's going to be the one that's going to tell us whether Mossad was involved in killing Epstein or whether, there's Mossad people on that list, or whether there's pro-Israel people on that list of Epstein clients, which of course there will be, because that's why, as a Mossad agent, he had cameras in every room. People ask this question all the time, Rich. How does Israel, a little country, have so much power? Now, of course, some of it is financial with AIPAC and stuff like that, but a lot of it is compromat. Those people that were close to Epstein, that were staying at Epstein's island or staying at his apartment in Manhattan and various other places, and Wexner's ranch out in Ohio and all these things, all it takes is for a girl, a young girl, or a boy, depending on your sexual persuasion, who's underage, and maybe some of these people, a lot of them are probably total wrong ones, but maybe some of them didn't realize that they were underage, and then, they carry on, behind their wives' or husbands' back or whatever, and then suddenly, oh, by the way, that girl she was 14. What? Yeah, there's the tapes of you and that girl. Any questions? Yeah. What do you want? Well, I want you to back Israel in every single vote here, there, and everywhere. So, that obviously goes on. So I can't see it being independent. And I also say, Rich, she's also a Republican congresswoman. So what if there's high-ranking congressmen in there? You think they're going to make it through? It should be completely independent.
It's the same thing as in the UK when they were looking to the paedophile charges in Parliament, isn't it? Just put one of your people in charge of it and swap them out if people make too much of a fuss about it. Another thing that gets missed with the JFK stuff is the Vatican's involvement. Now, he was the first Catholic president, and he openly stated he wanted to keep church and state separate, and then refused to kiss the ring. Don't snigger, we're all adults here, of the Pope. And that's obviously a something that you wouldn't do in public. It's a snub to the Vatican. And then his wife, and I think it's before they were married, she wrote a poem that says he was basically searching. He would find love, he wouldn't find peace, for he must go searching for the golden fleece. Now, the golden fleece is the highest order of the Vatican, so he was hunting them. There's clearly a Vatican element as well to this, and a Catholic element. And when you go to the top of the Catholic Church, really what you're looking at is the Church of Babylon, which are these bloodlines that are behind this Sabbatean movement, which feeds into this Messianic temple and going back to Jerusalem and all of this stuff. So there's so many things that weave into that. That's not just one faction, but a lot of people miss with JFK, the Vatican connection, the fact he was first Catholic president who basically snubbed the religion and said, you're not having anything to do with what we're doing here. It doesn't matter whether you're Catholic or Church of England. So that's a massive element. She's not going to be digging into that. So I completely agree with what you're saying. They've put someone in there that's clearly a bulwark to stop people looking into it. And that's so obvious. And another thing they don't look into with the Epstein stuff is people are so obsessed with the flight logs, but no one's talking about what's going on with the submarines. There was submarine ports on Epstein Island and St. Bart's and St. Thomas that's close by. There was much more going on underwater there than there was in terms of flights in and out. What a better sleight of hand than say, look up in the sky, then look underwater when everything is going on under there. We know Ghislaine Maxwell had a submarine license. There's submarine ports all over the place. Richard Branson's islands there, and he's got his own like mini subs there as well. So it's all connected under there. And when you go to Zorro Ranch, we've interviewed survivors of Epstein, talk about stuff going on under Zorro Ranch, under New Mexico. So people are looking up in the sky when I believe there's plenty of evidence to show that actually that's a ruse, and what's going on is happening underneath. Epstein even had cement trucks. So I think it was 2 or 3 days or maybe a couple of weeks before the raid on the island, filling in something. So come on, guys, there's something going on underneath. Let's stop banging on so much about the flight logs. It's what's going on underground there, out of sight. And that always is the way. So there's lots going on there. And this woman, Luna, who's changed her name to a Shekinah Luna moon goddess, is not likely to tell you much other than, as you say, she's a filter for all this stuff.
I think, even with the flight logs, I remember when they released them, the first name that was released was, what's his name? My head's gone. Stephen Hawking. And so what that created in people's minds was, oh, well, hang on, Stephen Hawking is in a wheelchair, completely disabled, basically can't do anything. I think, he obviously his brain was connected and could control things like that. Oh, okay. Well, he wasn't abusing anyone then because he can't physically. Or in which case, just because you're on a flight log doesn't mean that you're involved in anything. And therefore, that sort of almost in a way exonerated lots of people that were on those flight logs. But I think you're right. Yeah. Look up in the sky. Don't look down. The other interesting
There's also
thing,
a picture, Gaz, of him in the submarine with Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, you can argue that he didn't have a choice of whether he was going in the submarine or not. Absolutely. But that's really interesting that they released that photo of Stephen Hawking's in the submarine, but not anyone else who would have gone back and forth. I completely believe that most of that was happening underwater. But yeah, very interesting that they used Hawkins as almost like a scapegoat there.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing, we've spoke about this before, Rich, but people that are watching Trending might not have seen these conversations where, obviously, like you say, you've spoken to survivors, as have I, of Epstein, and they all say that what is so strange is that people admit to spending time with Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson's one of them. Bill Gates is another one of them. That they admit, Prince Andrew is another one of them. They admit to spending time with Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted, but they don't admit to spending time with him before he was convicted. Well, that's the wrong way round. That's the wrong way round.
So, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You'd say, no, I spent some time with him. We had some business dealings, and then I found out he was a total wrong un, and I was the hell out of there. But people do it the other way around, which makes no sense unless you think, well, what on earth was going on before that you're willing to take the hit for knocking about with a known sexual offender, because that's better than being associated with him, in terms of what was going on before. And just on the subject of Mandelson, you mentioned Mandelson there. He's just been named as ambassador to the United States, which is basically the biggest ambassadorial role in the UK. Obviously, UK, US, we're kind of, there's a lot going on between the two nations, and there basically always has been from when we were fighting each other as well. Now, a lot of people are now suggesting that the timing of this is not an accident, and the fact that these names are going to be released, or at least some of them are going to be released. His name is expected to be released because he was, very good friends with Epstein, and there's all these photos out there that you can find of them shopping together. But he, as ambassador, will have diplomatic immunity. Now, that, of course, is just a theory that I've seen a few people talking about, but it's an interesting one. It's definitely one to consider, I think.
You would have thought someone with those connections wouldn't be considered for the role of, a diplomat to the US, would you? So you've got basically Mandelson that hung around with Epstein after he was convicted, buying belts on St. Bart's. And I think they had a birthday party together, because that's what you do. And then you've got Trump, who was friends with Epstein very early on, before the convictions. And then there was this whole, they chucked him out of Mar-a-Lago and all of this stuff. Come on. Maybe that's true, and maybe they did have a falling out. But there was connections to both of these people through Epstein, who was Mossad. I mean, come on. This gets absurd again when it comes to what the wagons circling Trump. And I don't even know what else to say. They can just get away with it now. They're blatantly doing it out in the open. And so many other people had connections to Epstein that are involved with all this transhumanist agenda as well. Artificial intelligence, Boring Company, all of these things, Jeff Bezos and all of these guys had connections and run-ins with this Epstein. And there's a lot going on in terms of artificial intelligence and this eugenics part of it, which no one really talks about. They talk about the trafficking, but they don't talk about what was trafficked. They don't talk about what went on underneath Zorro Ranch. They don't talk about the transhumanist agenda and the clear fact that he was trying to seed, I think it was like 200 women at a time with his seed, because he probably believed he was the Antichrist and stuff like that. They don't look into this. The Moonchild stuff, which is the Rosemary's Baby stuff. This is the deep, dark stuff they don't want you looking at. They want you looking up in the sky at a flight log, people coming in and out the island. It doesn't tell you anything at all.
No, that's the thing. People don't realize, a lot of people don't realize exactly what Epstein was funding. I mean, I'm not convinced it was his money anyway, to be honest with you, mate.
No.
I think... I know Maria Farmer always said that Wexner was way above Epstein. Epstein was essentially, the not even the belly of the snake, let alone not the head. But there was a lot of funding of AI and transhumanism and eugenics and stuff. That was a lot of what he was interested in. And here we are now with the Trump government, with Elon Musk, who's also been photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell, by the way, really pushing this stuff. This transhumanist agenda. So it's to me, at least, when I look at this releasing of documents. Now, don't get me wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we find out everything. I hope it all comes out. Absolutely. But for me, it looks very much like someone's marking their own homework again. So I would like to be proved wrong, but I don't trust it. Right. Moving on then. This is a horrible story. So basically, this is from the United Kingdom. It's from Nottinghamshire, which is not too far from where we are here at the studios. The NHS Trust has been fined 1.6 million, basically for not learning from mistakes that they'd made previously that had led to the death of several babies. So they've already been fined before for these deaths in terms of negligence, a lack of cleanliness, and various other things that were going on in different hospitals within the Nottinghamshire Trust. They were given a list of things they needed to implement to stop that happening again. They haven't done that, so they've been fined another 1.6 million, which I think is the largest fine for something like this in terms of not learning from a mistake, basically. And so my first thought was, okay, well, what about Lucy Letby then? For people around the world, Lucy Letby is a nurse that was convicted of murdering 7 babies in a hospital in Chester and convicted of attempting to murder 7 more. There's basically no evidence that she did any of it, and more things are coming out that actually she wasn't on shift during the deaths of some of these that you're saying she was. 14 medical experts, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago now, I think 14 medical experts around the world have come out and said, hang on, she couldn't have done it. These babies weren't actually murdered. Her ward manager came out and said she couldn't have done it, yet even without any evidence, but lots of, reasons why she couldn't have done it, she was still convicted, and she's still in prison now, and she's being refused a retrial and an appeal. So we've mentioned that quite a lot because there's something going on clearly, because the evidence points to at very least a retrial, but they're not doing it. So who are they protecting on her behalf? Who is she protecting basically by taking the fall? So I saw this story in Nottinghamshire, and that was my thought. And I thought, well, let me go and have a look and just see how rife this is. Now, this was literally just before I came and sat down. And this came up from the end of last year. This is from Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust, which again, West Midlands basically, so not a million miles from here really, maybe an hour from here. An NHS Trust where maternity failings have led to the deaths of more than 200 babies is improving, inspectors say. 199 babies. The hospitals within Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust were visited by the Care Quality Commission, which concluded its overall rating of inadequate. So that's what it was before. So it was inadequate. I'd say the death of 200 babies was somewhat inadequate. It's improved, Richard. Woo! So don't panic if you're going to have a baby within the Telford and Shrewsbury NHS Trust. Don't panic. It's improved from inadequate. It is now in need of improvement.
Right? Isn't that the same thing?
Exactly. If it needs improvement, it's not adequate. Is it? And you look at that and you go, 200 babies, Richard. And then again, I'm going, well, where else is this? I mean, we're sat here, but I'll tell you what, I could go away and I'll start searching. And if people at home want to get involved in being a bit of a Columbo, start searching how many NHS trusts have these numbers of babies died, and then look back at the Lucy Letby case.
Yeah. It's astonishing. And what was astonishing from the very first part that you said was, why fine the NHS? How is that going to help the situation improve by taking away millions from the clearly struggling and crippled NHS? It doesn't make any sense unless you wanted to privatise it, maybe. But
well, yeah. They
know what I mean?
They blame that on the Tories, but that started with Blair's Labour, the mass privatisation. But we don't talk about
how fining the NHS makes any sense. You're taking money from our money, your money, my money, everyone in this country's money, away from a service that we need. It clearly needs improving and help, especially after the COVID scam, by taking money away from it. How is that going to help the situation in any way, shape, or form? It's not. It's going to affect the parents, the people working in the NHS. It's going to put more pressure on them. Doesn't make any sense. That's not a solution in any way, shape, or form. So, regardless, like in terms of the Lucy Letby stuff, clearly there's something going on here in terms of not working properly. Now, it could be nefarious. It could be all sorts of things. She's clearly being scapegoated for something that's much bigger. There's something being covered up here that really, really needs to be looked at. But taking away funding from a already failing system doesn't make any sense to me. What a backward, strange world we live in.
Exactly. I've thought that in many things. Like with a football club or a sports club that goes bankrupt and into administration, and so they fine them. You're like, what's the point? For me, the Letby thing stunk from the beginning. I looked at it and I thought, well, that doesn't really make much sense. That doesn't really add up. But I didn't know much more than the fact that I just didn't think it added up. And then the more that's come out since is insane. I mean, the evidence, if people want to take a look at it, is everywhere now, and it is extraordinary. And I guess it's just, it's easier to blame one nurse than it is to blame an entire, health trust, basically, with all those high-paid heads that would roll as a result of it, So one to look at, but I found that extraordinary today, Rich. The fact that the negligence that leads to the deaths of 200 babies has improved by basically going from inadequate to in need of improvement. I mean, it's a mad world we live in, mate. Speaking of mad worlds, this one you sent me this morning sort of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Clown World is probably not even good enough of a explanation of what you're about to see in terms of the videos. Now let's have a look at this. So, mental health crisis in Worcester City, so cancelled. This is Massachusetts, to become the first transgender sanctuary city, a place to go. So obviously we have Israel as a place for the Jewish faith to go. Now we have a place in Massachusetts for the transgender people to go so they feel safe. So the dangerous spiraling mental health crisis in America was on full show Tuesday as the city council in Worcester, Massachusetts, voted in favour of becoming a sanctuary city for the transgender community. Now, have a look at this video, because to me, this is clearly theatre and a bit of a clown show. Clearly, people do have issues with transgender issues. They do feel like they've been born in the wrong body. But this just makes a mockery of that proper, issue. So have a look at this. This is, I don't know what to say other than it's like a Monty Python sketch.
I need the city to protect me because the federal government won't. And if you think you're afraid of Trump, you should see how afraid of Trump I am.
Can you wrap up, please?
I do not want to be here. It's my day off. I do not want to be in your DMs. I do not want to be in your email inboxes. I do not want my creativity writing diss tracks like Kendrick.
So coming out of that, I don't really know what to say about that. That sounds like, it looks like the offcuts of a musical. The official, so city officials voted to enshrine a commitment to transgender rights and not to prevent people seeking so-called gender-affirming care. So they're normalising this thing here. So this comes back to the transgender, transhuman element later. That's normalising something that people have issues with these things, but it's the way in which it's dealt with. It's overblown, it's over-exaggerated, and it's made into what it seems to be a comedy, really, an absurdity. And there's a fine line between comedy and tragedy, as we said before. The vote was brought after Council at Large Thu Nguyen, a non-binary identified member of the board, alleged that they had been harassed and misgendered by other city officials.
How can you misgender
parade
someone
of
who's non-binary? Isn't non-binary that you're...
I think you binary them. I don't know, Gaz. This is the point. The language is supposed to work anymore, is it? So it's just like the Tower of Babel. It's the whole kind of thing. We can't communicate because it's such nonsense. A parade of individuals, it was definitely a parade, spoke for hours in public comments about how unsafe they feel since President Trump signed an executive order outlining the federal government recognising only two sexes, male and female. Now, we're not the biggest fan of Trump in the world, obviously, but that's clearly a logical thing to do. Now, I say he's just doing it to score points. Doesn't really care. He's part of this transhumanist agenda, clearly. But you've got to score some points along the way and then tick some boxes to facilitate your anti-woke backing. But to say that they're terrified because of Trump is hilarious. So what you're doing now is you're getting two extremes here. Of nonsense clashing together. This woke agenda is clearly, it's like watching Gotham City on heroin. It's mad, but what it does is it allows the other extreme, which is this Republican that are involved with this artificial intelligence, and it leads back to transgenderism anyway, and transhumanism, to seem like the good guys and the sensible lot. And when you're looking at Donald Trump and you think he's the sensible one, we're in some deep trouble, Gaz.
Well, it's the pendulum swing, isn't it, that was always going to come with the whole woke stuff that had been going on, let's have it right, for at least a decade. It's got more and more and more and more and more and more ridiculous that pendulum was always going to swing. And I mean, I look at this and I find it sad, really, because I look at some of those people there in that video and it is just attention seeking. There are obviously, some mental health issues there, almost certainly. But there's also a hell of a lot of attention seeking. Look at me. This obsession with identity. I'm a wheelchair bound, left-handed, transgender. I'm Gareth. Nice to meet you. Like, what is the point in all this identification nonsense? But then the other side of it is if they are making, I'm assuming it's Worcester, not Worcester. I'm sure that's a scene from Shrek, Rich, where Donkey says Worcester.
It's
I'll be
Worcester
Shreking
sauce,
instead.
isn't it? I
Yeah,
used to
but I'm
love
sure it's
Worcester
Worcester,
sauce crisps.
Massachusetts. But
Is
it can be. If it becomes a war, it's Worcester, innit?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But what you might find if they do make that a so-called sanctuary, sounds like a freaking zoo. They make it a sanctuary, then what you'll find is people around the United States, young people that maybe can't get, puberty blockers, nor should they at a young age, will actually find themselves heading to Worcester, and it almost becomes like Gretna Green for people that wanted to get married without their parents' consent, going back centuries. So that's a worry.
Yeah, he went as Bruce and came back as Sally.
Well,
And
exactly.
yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah.
But it's Caitlin, isn't it? He went in as Bruce and came out as Caitlin. The other part of it that I find sad is that, yes, okay, these make this big spectacle and stuff, and it's kind of quite funny in quite a tragic kind of way. But there are people out there with gender dysphoria that are really, really struggling. And up until it became fashionable, gender dysphoria was classed as a mental illness. It was classed as a mental illness on the NHS website in the United Kingdom up until I think about 3 years ago, when suddenly we'll take that off now, just pretend that wasn't there. And so what upsets me about it is no one's helping these kids. And I'm not really necessarily talking about these attention-seeking people in the video, but the people at home that are struggling, with a mental health condition. It seems to me that this gender dysphoria is the only one that no one actually offers any help for. They just appease it. They just affirm it. And I say this all the time, but if someone came in, and they say, oh, I'm a woman. I believe I'm a woman now. And you look at them and it's like a 6'5" guy. Like, okay, why have I got to affirm that? Because it's not true. And so instead of offering some kind of help with, okay, so why do you feel like that? What is going on internally that makes you feel like that? I just go, yeah, okay, that's fine. Here's a load of drugs that are going to make you infertile. And we'll cut your penis and balls off. Not a problem. And then we'll leave you to it. And if ever you come back as a detransitioner and try and expose what's happened to you, we will literally just disappear you, because that's what happens, because this is $1 billion industry. Instead of doing that, could we not try and help these people? Because if it was an eating disorder, if someone came in here now and went, oh mate, I am so fat, and you looked at them and they're 6 stone wet, and you're like, dead gaunt, you're not going to go, you are a fatty, you are, yeah, absolutely, whoo, mate, you should go for a jog. You wouldn't do that, because it's a ridiculous thing to do. It's an immoral thing to do. Yet when it comes to this gender dysphoria, that's exactly what we're doing with these people.
Yeah, well, common sense has gone out the window. When you look at the DSM and how big it's got and what is construed as a mental health issue, there's some absurd things in there. And what I'm kind of getting here is what we're doing, or what's being done, is they're simulating illnesses in terms of not like synthetic, in a way of that. Transgender issue is a real issue, but what we're seeing in the public is an over-exaggerated, synthetic, simulated theatre of what is a real issue. So you're not looking at the real issue that people do have. You're actually distracted by a theatre pretending to be of that issue, if that makes sense. So we're living in a wonky world of weirdness that's not really looking at the actual issue, which is far more subtle than that, the far more individual, far more person to person who has that issue. What we're looking at is a theatre show that distracts from the actual issue, where then people that have the actual issue and have that problem don't get the help they need, because it's alleged that it's just absurd and weird, because what you're seeing is a simulation of that issue, not the real issue as of itself. It's a very clever mind trick where you're not really seeing the problem. You're dealing with a, as I said, simulation version of it. It's a very, very, and it's only just occurred to me that that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing the real issues. We're seeing a theatre of that issue, which distracts from the actual issue itself, which is far more complex and individual than a whole group of people. Much of it is borderline personality disorders.
Rich, essentially what you're saying, which I agree with, is you've got, obviously, I hate the LGBT community, like the idea, cut it there. I hate the term LGBT community, in the same way I hate the white community and the black community, the idea that everyone thinks the same if you've got the same skin color, it's not true. It's ridiculous. But you have, obviously lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, right? So you have people that feel like they're in the wrong body. I know people like that. It's But the theatre is all the letters after it, isn't it?
It is.
The made up nonsense that leads basically to, people putting down a saucer of milk to someone because they think they're a cat. And I think you're right. That's not gender dysphoria. That's just either attention seeking or George W. Bunkers. And that does take away from a real issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simulation. I think we read a story a couple of days ago. A teacher pretended she thought she was a cat and she was licking the students. What sort of world are we?
I think there's a bigger problem there.
There's a bigger problem than you think. You don't think you're a cat, do you? Maybe Biden thought he was an aardvark and he was sniffing all of the ants off the kids. I mean, it's like...
You should have claimed it, mate. You should have claimed it.
Claim it, Biden. Claim it, because you're an aardvark now. It's absurd, and these are these wacky, Gotham City versions of real issues, distracts from the actual issue, and I'm going to try with this word, legitimizes the actual issue itself.
Good effort, absolutely. Rich, right, that's all for today. I'm going to say goodbye and clear off for 10 days and actually stick to it now. I'm off to Mexico, to Acapulco to speak, which should be, interesting because I've never been there before. So we'll see how that goes. You're going to be back tomorrow with Jamie, aren't you? My 10-foot tall brother. So I'll see you probably in a couple of weeks, Rich. And we'll see what's going on in the world. I doubt it's any less crazy. For people at home, thank you as always for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you head over to shop.ickonic.com, you can take a look at, various products, but you can also take a look at the coffee in particular. And if you use the code TRENDING, you get 10% off that. I'll see you in a bit. Take care. Take care, Rich.
See you later. Be careful in Mexico.
I'll try not to get trafficked.